The grand office tower of Kane Industries gleamed under the morning sun, its glass walls reflecting the city skyline like a fortress of wealth and power. Inside, Alexander Kane, the billionaire CEO, sat behind his massive mahogany desk, reviewing quarterly reports with a sharp gaze. He was a man used to control, used to being admired, and, most of all, used to never being challenged. "Sir," called his assistant, her voice slightly trembling. "There's a young woman here to see you. She says she's the new owner." Alexander leaned back in his leather chair, a low chuckle escaping him. "The new owner? Bring her in," he said, amusement dripping from his voice. He expected a joke, perhaps a prank. Surely no one could just claim ownership of his empire without his knowledge. The door opened, and in walked Emma Carter. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with Alexander's imposing presence. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, a soft pink hoodie paired with dark trousers, and carried a leather folder under her arm. Alexander's laugh echoed through the office before she had even spoken. "I'm sorry," he said between chuckles. "Did I hear that correctly? You're the new owner." Emma held his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir. I am. My name is Emma Carter, and I inherited Kane Industries from my aunt, Margaret Carter." The room went silent. Even Alexander's assistant froze, unsure of what to say. Alexander himself stared at her, disbelief evident in his sharp blue eyes. He opened his mouth, intending to mock her further, but something in Emma's calm tone stopped him. She didn't waver. She didn't stumble. She didn't look afraid. "Come now," he said, still laughing nervously. "Surely this is some kind of mistake. How could someone like you, no offense, inherit a company like mine?" Emma smiled faintly, placing the leather folder on his desk. "It's not a mistake, sir. The will is legally binding. My aunt believed in ethics, vision, and integrity. She trusted me to carry forward the company." Alexander raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. He picked up the folder, opening it to reveal the legal documents. His laughter faded as his eyes scanned the pages. He stopped suddenly at the signature line. Emma Carter. The words hit him like a cold gust of wind. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a rumor. This was real. The signature was hers, and it was legally binding. His empire, every asset, every subsidiary, every decision, now rested in the hands of this young woman standing confidently before him. "You're kidding," he muttered, his voice tight. "This can't be real." Emma shook her head calmly. "It is real, sir. And I have the paperwork to prove it." She slid the folder toward him, keeping her composure as his fingers trembled slightly while holding it. The assistants whispered among themselves, glancing nervously at Alexander. The CEO, who had never been surprised in his life, was stunned into silence. Alexander's mind raced. How could this be? He had built this empire from scratch. Every deal, every acquisition, every risk had been his. And now, out of nowhere, a young woman who seemed more like a student than a CEO was standing in front of him as the rightful owner. Alexander stood abruptly, towering over Emma, trying to regain his authority. "You're young," he said sharply. "Inexperienced. How do I know you're capable of running this company?" Emma met his gaze without flinching. "Experience is valuable, sir. But so is vision, integrity, and determination. I may be young, but I understand responsibility. I intend to honor my aunt's wishes and lead Kane Industries with dedication." Her words carried a weight that surprised him. There was no arrogance, no attempt to manipulate, only confidence and honesty. Alexander found himself scrutinizing her, noticing details he hadn't expected. The clarity in her eyes, the steady calm in her hands, the quiet dignity in her stance. He felt a twinge of something unfamiliar. Respect. Perhaps. Or maybe it was the realization that he had underestimated her. "Sit down," he said finally, trying to mask his unease. "Let's review the documents." Emma nodded and took a seat, placing her folder neatly on the desk. As Alexander examined the papers again, confirming the legality of the transfer, his expression shifted from disbelief to reluctant acceptance. The empire he had built was no longer his to command. but the woman before him had proven that she deserved it. The assistants, sensing the tension, kept a cautious distance. Alexander's pride wrestled with his growing curiosity. How had this young woman gained his aunt's trust? How would she lead the company? Could she survive in a world he had mastered? Emma spoke softly but firmly, breaking the silence. "Sir, I respect the work you've done here. I intend to build on it, not dismantle it. I hope we can work together." Alexander looked at her, studying her carefully. He had always believed that wealth, experience, and authority were the keys to respect. But here was someone who commanded respect simply by standing her ground, by showing courage and integrity. The chapter ends with Alexander sitting back in his chair, a mixture of disbelief, awe, and curiosity in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt challenged, not by a competitor, but by a young woman who had walked into his office and changed everything with a simple signature. Outside the office, the city continued its relentless pace, unaware that a new leader had taken charge, and inside, Alexander Kane was forced to confront the one thing he had never faced before: humility. The morning sun cast long beams across the Kane Industries headquarters, glinting off the towering glass walls. Alexander Kane sat in his office, staring out at the city below, hands steepled under his chin. The events of the previous day played on a loop in his mind. Emma Carter, young, composed, and utterly confident, had walked into his office and claimed ownership of the empire he had spent decades building. He had spent the night replaying every detail, every word, every confident gesture, wondering how someone so young could suddenly command his world. His pride burned like a stubborn fire. Yet, beneath that fire, curiosity simmered. The door opened quietly, and Emma stepped in. She carried a small tablet, her posture calm, her expression professional yet warm. "Good morning, sir," she said. "I'd like to discuss the company's current projects and some immediate changes I'd like to implement." Alexander's instinct was to dismiss her, to assert his authority as the former CEO. But he noticed something in her demeanor. She wasn't overconfident, she wasn't challenging for the sake of it. She was prepared, thoughtful, and she had a plan. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward the chair opposite him. "Let's hear it." Emma opened the tablet and laid out her vision. A strategic reorganization of departments, a focus on ethical investments, and employee-centric policies. She spoke with clarity and insight, referencing specific projects and data points that demonstrated her understanding of the business. Alexander raised an eyebrow. She knew what she was talking about. Every sentence revealed a sharp, analytical mind, one that respected the foundation he had built while envisioning a future he hadn't considered. For the first time, Alexander felt a twinge of admiration. But his pride refused to acknowledge it outright. Instead, he challenged her. "And what makes you think your ideas will succeed? The market is ruthless. One wrong move and everything collapses." Emma met his gaze evenly. "I know the stakes, sir. But fear shouldn't paralyze decisions. We lead with knowledge, ethics, and careful planning. That's what my aunt believed in, and that's how I intend to lead." Alexander studied her. There was no hesitation, no doubt, no reliance on luck. She had inherited more than a company. She had inherited responsibility, and she bore it like a true leader. Their discussion was interrupted by a sudden alert. A rival corporation, Crestview Holdings, had learned of the leadership change and was attempting a hostile takeover. A flurry of calls, emails, and meetings ensued. Employees whispered nervously in the corridors, unsure if the company would survive the chaos. Emma didn't flinch. "We handle this strategically," she said, pulling up financial data, contracts, and legal protections. Alexander watched her orchestrate the plan, issuing clear instructions, rallying departments, and staying composed under pressure. He realized something remarkable. The woman he had laughed at just days ago was steering the ship with authority, precision, and vision. Alexander Kane, who had faced boardroom battles, stock market crashes, and corporate espionage, found himself observing in awe. Hours passed, and the crisis reached its climax. A tense negotiation with Crestview executives unfolded in the glass-walled boardroom. Alexander stood beside Emma, ready to step in if necessary, but she handled it all. Calm, persuasive, and unyielding, Emma presented counteroffers, revealed legal loopholes, and demonstrated her knowledge of the company's strengths. By the end of the meeting, Crestview Holdings withdrew, acknowledging that Kane Industries was no longer vulnerable. Employees cheered quietly, a sense of relief washing over the headquarters. Alexander Kane, however, remained silent, leaning against the conference table, eyes fixed on Emma. "You did remarkably well," he said finally, his voice low, tinged with something like respect. "I didn't think you had it in you." Emma smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without the strong foundation you built. This company thrives because of your work, too." Alexander felt a strange warmth, a mixture of pride and humility. For years, he had believed respect was earned through power, money, and fear. But here was someone who earned it simply by showing courage, intelligence, and integrity. The board convened shortly after. Alexander, for the first time, spoke publicly in support of Emma. "Emma Carter is the rightful owner of Kane Industries," he announced, his voice steady. "She has demonstrated skill, vision, and commitment. I trust her leadership and will support her fully." Board members nodded, impressed by the seamless handling of the takeover crisis. Employees cheered quietly, and a sense of unity filled the room. After the meeting, Alexander and Emma stood in the executive corridor, overlooking the city below. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Alexander broke the silence. "You surprised me," he said. "I underestimated you." Emma turned to him, a warm but confident smile on her face. "And I respect the empire you built, sir. I'm here to honor it, not challenge it unnecessarily." Alexander looked at her, realizing how much he had learned in just 2 days. Leadership wasn't about domination. It wasn't about wealth or fear. It was about vision, integrity, and courage. Emma had all of it. The chapter closed with a sense of new beginnings. Employees resumed their work with renewed energy, the company secure under Emma's leadership. Alexander Kane, the man who had laughed at her mere days ago, now walked beside her. Not as a superior, not as a rival, but as a mentor, ally, and perhaps the first person to truly understand the strength behind her signature. Outside, the city glittered in the late afternoon sun, a silent witness to the start of a new era. And in that moment, both Emma and Alexander knew that Kane Industries had a future brighter than either of them could have imagined.